What does a pharmacist do? Well, most people might answer that a pharmacist dispenses the medications that my doctor prescribes. Now, I work with a ton of great pharmacists, and one thing that I don't generally see is excitement about pills in a vial. And this is probably because pharmacists have been trained to do so much more. So what can you get excited about in your community? To find out, let's go beyond the scripts. Hey, I'm Will Tuft, and you're watching Beyond the Scripts. And this week, we want to talk about some of the overarching themes that you hear in pharmacy when you go to different trade shows, when you talk to pharmacies. There is a lot of negative feelings out there about the challenges that independent pharmacy is facing right now. In fact, there's an article that I found on drugtopics.com that said that around 58% of independent pharmacies say that they are somewhat likely or very likely to close their doors in the next 2 years if things don't improve. And this had a lot of really negative statistics in there. So, there's definitely a lot of room for focusing on the negatives, but at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity out there. And you can also find pharmacists that are finding those opportunities, who are opening new doors, while we keep hearing only about the doors that are closing. But every day, pharmacy schools have new enrollments and new graduates, and every day at PioneerRx, we see new stores coming through the sales process. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. So how can you go about finding that opportunity, not only if you're looking at opening a new store, but maybe if you have a store, what can you think about it in a little bit different way? So today we have a really special guest here, Joe Williams, out there in North Carolina. And Joe definitely has a little bit different approach to business in general, and specifically with his pharmacy. So Joe, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Will. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. I told Brandon, our editor here, this may be the first Beyond the Scripts we have to go back and censor. So I'm gonna go ahead and prep everybody for Joe.
I told you I'd be good.
So Joe, for anybody that doesn't know you out there, and I feel like that's going to be relatively few, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's focus first on one pharmacy at a time here. Tell me a little bit about Fairmont. Or no, let's go back to Brisson.
Okay, yeah, we can start at Brisson. Brisson's is kind of near and dear because it was the first store that I bought back in 2015. It was a small, low-volume store. To be honest, I didn't even know where it was when someone mentioned it to me, and it's only 15, 20 minutes from my home. And it was really the perfect place for me to go when I first got started. Traditional setting, large front end, no additional services or anything. It was just your standard dispensing pharmacy. And so it was really a blank slate that had cash flow. It was well managed the way that it was. It just wasn't high volume, and that was where the previous owner was happy. He had wised up, as he likes to tell me sometimes, and he knew how hard he had to work, and he was good, And he had lived through periods where margins were much higher across the boards for pharmacies without having to have a niche or any kind of specialty. And so bought it in January of 2015. And the first 6 months, I really didn't do anything different. I just was trying to figure things out, get my feet under me. My first time being all by myself running a store. And about 6 months in, I said, okay, it's time. Now we're going to put Joe's spin on things. We're going to start doing things a little bit different. And from there, there's really no looking back. The store grew year over year. It was doubling. Actually more than doubling. And now the store is doing more than 10 times what it was doing when we bought it. And it still continues to grow. Even through COVID, the store has still grown both in patients and in revenue. It's just a special place. It's like my second home.
That location's been there almost 100 years.
It's been there more than 100 years, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and the population hasn't grown exponentially since you've taken over. So what has changed?
So you bring up a great point, because I actually recognized that early on too. I said, we're not in I'm not in the suburbs of Dallas where they're going to, or, you know, some other city that's going to continue to grow and all these new people are going to be coming in, young families and what have you. I am in a rural town that used to be based on industry and agriculture, and those are not thriving like they once were. So, but what is there and what does continue to grow is the needs of the underserved. And what we found is that, you know, they weren't always going to be able to come to us, but we could go to them. So this really special thing happened. I was at a trade show and there was a raffle and I threw my name in the hat and I won a car. And it was like something from above, God from above says, here's this car, you go to them. And when the car is free, you don't really care so much about the price of delivery or the cost of delivery because, you know, it's already taken care of. And so we started doing some local deliveries, you know, just kind of ones and twosies at a time. And then we had this one particular patient who he had a major medical event and he needed compliance packaging, right? He couldn't recognize words on a bottle anymore, but at the same time he was adamant that he was going to be an independent person still. And so we had to figure out a solution. So we went into multi-dose blister for one patient. And within 3 months, the need, we started recognizing the need amongst other patients within our existing patient population. And we were ramping up really, really quickly. And then some local care management companies and hospital systems and primary care offices started hearing about what we were doing. And we were doing all of these things for free because we are in an underserved area and we had the car so we could take it all to them. And the next thing you know, we've got more than 400 patients in compliance packaging, and we're buying a rapid pack to keep up with it because we can no longer find enough places to pack compliance packaging. And we on-ramp, 5 and 6 people a week still into the program. It was one of those things where it just never, ever stopped. And it's been one of the most rewarding things that we've ever done because when you go into we go to these people's houses, and help them and figure out what they need. I mean, we even had a paramedic on staff that had this special sort of certification as a community paramedic. We were doing fire inspections. We were, cutting limbs out of trees of houses so that the local transportation company could go pick them up. So this is a quick story, and I'm long-winded, but forgive me. We go to this house, and we had this patient that kept getting readmitted to the hospital. So the hospital's like, you guys have got to help us figure out what the problem is. They want to blame it on this, and they want to blame it on that. The guy just refused to go to dialysis, they said, and then he waited until he was, he was going to die the next day, and then he would call an ambulance and go be diuresed in the hospital. So we go to the house, and the guy is an amputee. So it was like, what's the deal? Why don't you go to dialysis? Well, I don't have a way. Well, why don't you call the local area, transportation? It's called Seats. He says, I did. They won't come out here. Why won't they come out here? Because of that big limb at the end of my long driveway. Oh, okay. We'll be back in 30 minutes. We come back with a ladder and a chainsaw, cut the limb out of the tree, called Seats, and the guy didn't go back to the hospital. It's like, people, the guy didn't need a major medical intervention. He needed somebody that knew how to cut a limb out of a tree to change his entire world. And the hospital system is raving about it because now they're not going to be penalized for all the things that he was causing. So but until you meet that patient where they're at, and you have boots on the ground to identify those social determinants of health, those challenges that patient is facing. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. And in a small community, it seems like maybe you have the advantage of being able to pull up and, hey, Joe's here with the chainsaw. Yeah, that's exactly what we did. I mean, we've helped people move. We had a COPD patient, same thing, kept getting readmitted. Go to his house. And he lived in an older home, and the walls were plastered with mold and mildew. And it's like, shortness of breath, having some trouble breathing. Well, maybe this has something to do with it. So we go down to the local apartment complex, and get his name on the list, take pictures, explain the situation, had somebody from even the local hospital system reach out to the apartment, got the guy moved up the list, moved him over, problem solved. I'm a pharmacist, so I want meds to be a part of the solution. But half the time, the solution is just going out and being a human being and figuring out what's really going on with these people and going the extra mile to solve their problems. And we don't make any money when we do these things. But what we did do was we created lasting relationships with that patient, his family, the apartment manager, the hospital system that saw what we did. And then there's where the referrals come. That's the feedback loop that keeps helping the business grow. That's the pharmacy that does those kinds of things. So then the apartment manager is telling everybody in the apartment complex that they should come to our pharmacy because we're going to do what we got to do to help them. The hospital system is going to have high-risk discharges that are going to call us and say, we want you to make sure that you're taking care of these patients. So, the here and the now, the benefit might not be there, but in the long run, it keeps coming back. It keeps coming back.
So when you're doing these things, are you focusing on bullet points like you hear when you go to trade shows, you hear the enhanced services, you hear the buzzwords like functional medicine, like social determinants of health, like turning your delivery drivers into health coaches, community health workers.
Right.
So all of that really just kind of seems to fall under the umbrella of just listening and connecting and service.
So when I'm proposing something to an entity, I use the buzzwords, but when I'm talking to my staff and I'm talking to the patients, go out there and treat them like it's your grandmother. Just go out there and be good to them, love on them, do whatever you got to do to look after them. Let me know if I can fill in any gaps, and everybody's going to be better off. But when you present, or I'm speaking to a group of professionals, I have to use the buzzwords. But when it's me and patient XYZ down the road, he's just my neighbor that I need to look after.
So in a small town, Joe Williams is just as likely to be seen with a chainsaw,
probably
an ice cream scoop, or an amber vial, if you're one of your patients, and that's a really that's a lot of hats to wear as a community pharmacist. But I feel like that's really what it takes in a small, in any community.
I tell everybody that I'm just a blue-collar good old boy that happens to have all these degrees behind my name and has been lucky enough to fall where I fell. Because half the things that I do every day are things that my granddad taught me. Just be good to the neighbor and take care of them and fix their problems, and everything else just keeps working itself out.
So it definitely seems like you have a little bit different point of view than some of the other owners of the pharmacy you were in even. So do you think that comes from your educational background? Because you didn't start out as a pharmacist. You are more business-minded first, right?
Right, I am. So I was going to be a game warden. That's where I was headed, and then that just didn't seem to work out, and because it didn't make sense when I started looking at the numbers. And so I decided to go get a degree in business. And then I graduated and was recruited by Walgreens, so the big box, and into a management training program. I worked my way up the ladder, really quick, became a store manager, and was working 80 hours a week, killing myself for them. I do enjoy work. I find it very, very rewarding. And so I was doing everything I could for them to help them and, grow. And then as things continue to evolve, you realize that they don't really have your best interest in mind. That it's a corporate structure. It's different. Give, but there's not always that reciprocation. And so I was fortunate enough to have two pharmacists come in just off the street that needed a job, and they were, hoping to get on board with Walgreens. And one of them had been a high school math teacher or a chemistry teacher. Chemistry teacher. And I was like, how did you end up here? And she's telling me the story. And I said, well, I can do that. And literally within 30 days, I had gone to the local university to find out exactly what I needed to do to become a pharmacist. What do you want to see to accept me? Whenever I can, however soon I can apply. I'd done that. I'd gone and I'd mapped out the entire curriculum that I needed to complete over the course of 1 year. I had to do two years of prerequisites in 1 year, put in my notice, worked it out, did the whole thing. and just hammered away. And then when I went into pharmacy school, I was lucky enough to go to a school that had a joint MBA program. And business is just, it's this easier, natural thing for me. I just enjoy it. I like it. It makes sense. I can connect the dots. So, I picked up the MBA at the same time. And then I told myself I would own a store in 3 years. And it ended up taking me 3.5, because I had to buy a foreclosed house and remodel it at night so that I could then flip it to get enough money, because banks don't understand pharmacy, as all of you watching know. And so you do whatever you got to do to get where you want to be, and that's kind of what I did, and it's worked out.
Okay, so you got into Brisson drug, kind of doing your thing, growing your patient base. At what point did you see the opportunity for additional services and bring in Matthew?
Okay, so from the start, Matthew was actually supposed to be in the store almost 2 years before he came in. And we just kept having hiccup after hiccup and hold up after hold up, just because of the entity that we have that brought in Matthew. Matthew's a nurse practitioner here in the store. We have a walk-in clinic, and it just took a long time to put all of the pieces together on their end. Adding the clinic has been a big game changer, because now the pharmacy feels more like a health hub. It's a place where they can go and get really anything that they need. I mean, we've been doing a lot of COVID testing in the back, so we're getting patients that are walking through. Does kind of, worry some of the staff, but we got the shields up and everything. But it's just people are finding out about our pharmacy that I told you I didn't even know where the store was when I bought it. And so there's people that live, within 10 or 15 miles that didn't know the store was here, that are finding it because of the clinic, and they're continuing to come in. Many of them are staying. Based on the layout, they have to pass through the pharmacy to get to the clinic, which allows us to make our soft introductions and how are you, and then we recognize them the second time in, which keeps them coming back, and then they transfer. It's really worked out well. They've been a really, really great strategic partner to have the clinic in the pharmacy.
Yeah. So how did that come about? Did you reach out to them? Like how does that work with the services offered there? What kind of agreements were you able to work out?
So the way that it's structured, well, first off, a gentleman walked into my store on a Saturday morning and said, "How you doing?" I said, "Great." He says, "Good. I want to put a clinic in your pharmacy." I said, "Come on, come on." Because to be honest with you, it's an old downtown building. So it's really, really long, and it's fairly wide. And only about 55% of the store was built out. So there was this warehouse space in the back that had everything in it. I mean, everything. And so it was just empty with just junk. And so he's like, "I want to, put it in. What do you think we could do? What do you think we could do?" And I was like, "Well, come on back here. Let me show you something." And I just went back and opened the big doors, and there's all this stuff. There was a piano. There was a tanning bed. The previous owner, when I walked in that morning of January the 2nd, 2015, he had not prepared for me to come. He literally stood up out of his chair and said, "Peace," and walked out and didn't take anything with him. So there was so much stuff back there. It was insane. And so when they came in to look at the clinic, I had just bought a diner. It was actually in a pharmacy that's about 30 minutes from here. They had the entire lunch counter diner. I bought the whole thing, and I would go up there after work and on weekends and slowly dismantle and bring everything in. All I wanted was they had a fountain. An old school fountain, soda fountain. And I really, really wanted that fountain. And the only way that I could get it is if I bought the entire diner. So I bought the whole diner, and I would take, some of my employees up with me in the afternoons, and we would work and, take care of all this stuff and take it apart and bring it back. We had crammed it all back there in the back. And then I had another friend that was building the fountain counter. Like if you go into some of these beautiful old stores that I've been lucky enough to go into while consulting, it's this big, tall fixture with the mirrors and the intricacies of the woodworking, and it's just beautiful. Yeah. And that's what I had envisioned, because those kinds of places have a really special place in my heart, and I wanted something like that. And so I've got the equipment in the back. The contractor the same week is sending me the rendering of that cabinetry, and I've got this whole thing figured out. We're getting the plumbing figured out for everything. And he says, hey, we want to put this clinic. So I call my contractor buddy. I'm like, all right, just nix the cabinetry for right now. I got to go down this road. And they're like, when we want it up now, took 2 years to get it up. But here's the way that I had it. I was already doing hand dipped ice cream, right? And we weren't making money off the ice cream. It was more or less a way to get people inside the store. I mean, I gave away 100 times more ice cream than I ever sold, and I ate so much. If you look at pictures of me back from then, oh man, this chin was like twice what the size it is right now. But so the clinic probably saved me from an early heart attack and from being 100 pounds heavier than I am right now. But when I got to thinking about it, I'd already bought this fountain, and I still have the fountain. I'm not getting rid of it. I sold everything else, but I kept the fountain and the stools. If I have a fountain in my house one day, everybody can come over and we'll eat ice cream and have fun. But the cabinetry was very expensive because the how detail oriented I wanted it to, how detailed I wanted it to be. But if I got to thinking about it and counting it up, I was going to have to pay somebody to go up and run this essentially, because it was not going to be inside the pharmacy the way we'd laid it out. I was going to have all those food costs, and there's a ton of waste in that. And then my floors were always going to be sticky. They were, because the kids with the ice cream, I mean, those floors were always sticky. So even though it took them 2 years, they really pulled me out of a mistake that I was about to make, for my store. Because again, I've gone to these stores that are successful with this, and they can put a $6 price point on a milkshake, and there will be a line out the door. Mm-hmm. My milkshakes were going to have to be $1 to $1.50 just to get people inside, just because of the demographic that I primarily serve. So I knew that it was not going to be a revenue, a big profit maker for me. It was just going to be a draw. And there's only a limited number of people that are within a distance they'd be willing to drive to go get a fancy milkshake or something like that. So they really did me a favor.
All right. So at this point you have Brisson Drug. You've expanded into offering other healthcare services, other enhanced services, some just community connections, and things are going well. And you say, hey, maybe I should make things harder for a little while and start a whole new ball of wax.
Yeah.
So you acquire or open a second pharmacy?
I buy Clinic Pharmacy.
Okay.
So Clinic came on January 2018. I told myself that I needed about 2 to 3 years to kind of get things figured up. And I didn't have any money when I graduated. And then when I bought Brisson, that took all of the money that I had saved. So I needed to kind of get myself back up, in a financial position that I was comfortable. I like buffers. And so I bought Clinic, and we closed January 2nd, 2018, 3 years to the day after Brisson I'd bought it. And that store was a little jewel. It was about 70 years old when I bought it already. I like older stores, obviously. And it had cash flow already, had positive cash flow. It had a great customer base that was extremely loyal to the store, a good reputation in town. The family that had previously owned it, they were wonderful people, very, very well respected and well known in the community. And I was lucky enough that the granddad had started it, and then the son, who was a pharmacist, took over, and now his daughter, who is one of the best technicians you've ever met, was working there and had worked there for some time, and she was going to stay. So I was going to continue that family legacy component as well, and that way you wouldn't lose those customers. That was part of the agreement that I had. I was like, I want her to stay, and and I even said, and we joke about this, that I wanted her to stay initially because I thought that I might be inheriting some issues there, that my dad didn't run the store that way, blah, blah, blah. We've all seen those kinds of situations where those transitions can get sticky. It's the exact opposite. She adapted to our model because we do things exactly the same way in both stores, or all 3 stores now. And she adopted the model. She fell right into it. She flourished. She's I think she's an even better tech now. I mean, she was fantastic when we got her, but I think she's even more well-rounded now. Anything that we've ever asked her to do, she's done. And those customers, they still expect to see her when she comes in. And luckily enough, all of us that have gone over and been added to that store, we've all been adopted by the community as well. And it's really, really, really paid off. Heck, I was in there yesterday, and a guy that is not even a patient there came by and brought him a 16-layer chocolate cake. And I didn't know him. I'd never seen him. And I said, "What's going on with that?" And she says, "Oh, he just does that." I said, "What do you mean he just does that?" I said, "I've never seen him. He's not a patient here. It's just this community spot where people will come through and talk." And I don't know the situation why he doesn't fill his meds, but he brought him a 16-layer chocolate cake. So it's a great place to go work from time to time because you get fed.
So here's this pharmacy, another small town.
Yeah, it's a bedroom community off of a city that is, it's near Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So that's where really large military base, Fayetteville, North Carolina, and it's a bedroom community called Hope Mills. Not a ton of people, I'd say there's probably about 10,000 people in Hope Mills, maybe. And there was no competition there when I bought it. I was the only independent in Hope Mills. That was the reason I wanted it.
And that's exactly where I was going with this, is that seems like that's one of the demographics that we see often. Smaller town, a pharmacy that's been there for a long time, a lot of roots in the community, and an aging owner who's, starting to think about his options. And one of the options has to be, a 3-letter coming in, or, one of the big box stores, and buying those pharmacies out. So when you went to look at this pharmacy, what opportunities did you see that, hey, there's an opportunity here, they're not taking advantage of this? What did you look at in your evaluation that said, I'm comfortable taking this new risk?
Okay, so in that area there was 3 big boxes and this one independent, and the store had consistent, steady revenues and growth, annually, but they weren't growth anything like what I was seeing just 15 minutes down the road. And my favorite thing that I love to look at is one of my things that I think I'm best at is inventory management. And they were one of only 2 pharmacies in the wholesaler of more than 500 stores that still used this DOS-based ordering system. Okay. I didn't even look at the screen. He's like, "Let me show you this." And I know you don't even have to turn that on. I'm not interested. And they had that old mentality of how you would manage inventory. Now they were more advanced than some that I'd seen. Like they knew like things that were really expensive and they needed to wait until certain days to order them. But they were doing nothing like how I run my inventory, because they had lived through the heyday of high gross margins when cash flow was not as critical to pay attention to as it is today. And so, number one, I saw that. Number two, you could look at the NDCs that they were dispensing just by walking the shelves, and you could recognize that there was a lot of missed opportunities, within the patient population that they had. They weren't doing any vaccines at all. They provided no additional services at all, really, for that matter, other than traditional pharmacy dispensing. The front end was like a lot of stores that you see now. There was some really nice display cases all around the store that were empty. And so it just needed some freshening up and kind of opening up, make the place feel a little more vibrant. It had not been, the fixtures had not been updated in quite some time. And so and that leads to a little quick story here. We actually got robbed, at gunpoint 2 months or 3 months after I bought it. So I'm this new owner, new store. You're talking about, headaches and need problems. So I get this phone call. I was doing something. I was not in the store that day. I get this phone call. I'm 30 minutes away. I don't know that I've ever driven that fast for that long down the interstate. I even ran a red light with a cop behind me, and he pulled me over, and I threw the door open and said, "My pharmacy just got robbed." And he literally said, "Just go," and let me go. And I took off, And so
I'm going to use that.
Yeah, try it. Let me know how it works for you. It worked well for me. But I was planning to remodel eventually when my bank account said that it was a good idea to remodel. But after the way that the old setup was, the guy was just able to walk in. So we went ahead and freshened the entire store up within, like I said, 4 or 5 months of buying all new fixtures. Of course, we updated with Pioneer. They were using DOS-based QS1. And I won't say anything there. They were using DOS-based QS1, and that was about like that ordering system. Just don't even turn it on. You just run it, show me how I need to check until tomorrow, because you guys couldn't be there the night of January 1st. So we stayed the next night, and the second day of business, I was back in Pioneer heaven, and I was able to do everything that I needed to do and got the store all fixed up, But they were like so many of the stores that you described. I mean, that's very, very, very true. All these baby boomers that are retiring, most of them don't want to sell their stores to Three Letter. I mean, they or to Walgreens or to anybody else. They want to see their legacy. I told you the store was 70 years old. It was opened by the patriarch of the family there, and now the son had ran it his entire life. Those people don't want to see their stores go away.
No, it's their legacy. It's their commitment. Their contribution to the community. And so to see that go to, a corporation's unfortunate. Right. And that's why I love NCPA's ownership conference. They talk a lot about ways to identify and get into those relationships. But, it's unfortunate that so often that relationship isn't found in time.
Yeah, we actually had, and this is the other thing that I do, like if you were a pharmacist and you were over the age of 45 and within however far of me, and I call your pharmacy to get a transfer, to just talk to you about something, I ask, aren't you about ready to sell that store? And I've got leads. I've got leads on pharmacies everywhere, because that's not a time to be bashful. If you're going to be, bullish and you want to go get more stores, you got to put the word out there that you want to buy. I had a situation recently where there was this store that I had made it very obvious that I would like to purchase it. And I got a phone call from a pharmacist looking for PRN work. And I said, no, I thought you worked PRN for such and such. Yeah, but they sold to CVS. And I was like, let me call you right back. Hung the phone up, called the owner, and I said, what's going on? And they were like, well, I told such and such to tell you. Why didn't you call me? And the word was, well, when you didn't receive, and I went back to that person that they told, and they were like, well, I wasn't sure that they wanted me to tell you, and blah, blah, blah. You be obvious, be very upfront, be bold about it. If you want more stores and you want to be aggressive about it. These people don't want to sell. She put the word out to several owners that she thought might be interested. And when no one came back, she said, well, I don't have a choice. Nobody really wants this store. But she's not the type of person to be aggressive in approaching you and saying, hey, you should come by my store. So if you want a store, you have to be very obvious, very blunt. Call me. Call me when something happens and you're ready to go.
Yeah. And it seems like, just like what you said, networking and communication and having that relationship. Again, independent pharmacy, it's even if you're two independent pharmacies in the same town, there's this level of collaboration most of the time that you don't see in other industries. So
for sure,
just keep those lines of communication open for sure, it seems.
You had one across the street from us at one time. You could throw a rock and hit it.
So what would you tell that owner who is going to sell if they have a pharmacy that they've been doing the same thing for a long time? Obviously, if they've been surviving in that climate, doing things the same way they did 20 years ago, they could do better.
Absolutely.
That store could flourish if it survives with little water. Just imagine, what some maintenance could do. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to IndyRx Consulting. So, if that owner called you and said, "Hey, Joe, I'm struggling here, man. I don't know. I guess I'm going to have to sell. Something's got to give."
No, that's I get that call.
What are the other options?
I even had a broker one time that called me just like this. He says, I've got this pharmacy that's for sale, but the offers aren't where they need to be. And so he says, we're looking for options here of what we can do to try to drive the price up. The owner's not comfortable with it. They don't think they want to sell at these prices, but they don't know how much longer they can hold on the way things are. And I was like, well, just, let me have a look at the store. And people don't know what they don't know. Okay, I've got to where I say that a lot because, something that, Will, to you is just common sense. You were talking about your previous career in the magazine, something about a car that you just think everybody should know what kind of car that is and how fast it's capable of and all that. A guy that's never seen that car, he might not even know what brand it is, right? And so it's like that in pharmacy and in business. These pharmacists are wired for patient care, for being this conscientious individual that loves their patients and does all of these things, and they put their own needs a lot of times on the back burner, and the needs of their business sometimes they put on the back burner. And whether that's because it's not at the forefront of the mind because it's not important to them, or because they don't know how to assess those things, a lot of times is what's going on. So I'll go into a store, or I'll take a look at a store, and honestly, there's this one story that I tell. I went into a store and I found $500,000 one day before lunch. And the way that I found it, I was walking down the counter and I glanced over. They were a Pioneer store, and the pharmacist was checking a prescription, and it was on their loyalty plan. And the acquisition cost of the drug was wrong, and they were using cost-based pricing for their retail plan. And I saw it, and I know that the drug cost a lot more than they were selling it for. And I said, how is that? How are you doing that? Oh yeah, no, that's our price. So of course I dive into the system, and I'm doing transaction searches, and I'm looking through everything. And it was drug after drug after drug after drug. And the store was a high performing store, a very high volume store that had a lot of niches. And so they weren't in the position that so many stores are in, but they had been leaving that much money on the table and didn't even realize it because they just didn't know. It was the environment that they operated in. The cost they didn't look at because I guess I have to say this. They were a 340B style pharmacy, so that a lot of the numbers were more or less arbitrary to them. But certain drugs are not applicable to 340B, so I'll kind of leave it at that. But they don't know this because they're not me in a store checking at traditional retail pricing or at the traditional pricing WAC based pricing that everybody else would be buying at. So they don't know what they're doing wrong there, and it's a lot of times if you think that you're ready to sell because you're not making the money that you thought you should be making, or maybe you're not making enough to keep your head above water, before you call a broker, call a peer. Call that independent owner that's 2 towns over that does not consider you a direct competitor, and say, hey, listen, I want you to come over to my store and just walk around. Just walk around and tell me if anything jumps out at you that I'm missing. You could also call me, but and I'd be happy to help you too. I mean, that's what I do every day. But I'll be honest with you. I think that because you don't know what you don't know, it sometimes helps to get another set of eyes on your situation to see if there's some big, red flag waving out there that you just think is part of the scenery.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't sell your car because it's making a funny noise.
You take it to a mechanic.
You wouldn't sell the fear. You would take it to a mechanic.
And see, I think that we all have this knee jerk now. I mean, especially the baby boomers that are retiring, and those, and they don't even have to be baby boomers anymore. It's someone who is, I hear, I'm not interested in clinical services. They're more they care to stick with the traditional dispensing model that so many of us have so many of them have done for so many years. Well, there's still opportunities there. There's still tons of things you can do there. You don't have to throw in the towel because you think pharmacy's getting more clinical than you care to do. You still have a ton of options, and you need to explore those options before you call a box or a broker or whoever. Just find out what your options are.
My next question here, I was an installer with PioneerRx for years, and I got to visit a ton of pharmacies all over the country. Mm-hmm. And I've actually visited pharmacies where the owner was the PIC, and pharmacists wouldn't want to take lunch because they had to be at the counter. They had so much ownership and not enough delegation that, they were struggling every day at the level of, do I take a lunch? So, I see Joe Williams opening a pharmacy, out cutting down branches, doing the Indy RX consulting, then opening clinic pharmacy, and then later Fairmont. You can't do that by yourself. So is that a solution? Is that part of your success? If you're a pharmacist who's maybe not comfortable moving into a new direction with an established pharmacy, maybe the direction is to move into a role of more delegation.
So I've experienced exponential growth since I pulled myself off of the bench. There's no denying it. We were fortunate. We bought Clinic Pharmacy in January. I ended up buying another pharmacy, St. Paul's Drug, in September of the same year. They were the one that I could throw a rock and hit at Brisson. And was really, really fortunate enough to have the pharmacist, the owner, join the store along with a couple staff members. Great transition, very smooth. Everything worked out beautifully. And when she came on, it meant that I now had another pharmacist that understood retail space and could help me. And so it helped me to kind of take a step back. And I recognized immediately how much more opportunities that I could find and take advantage of once I wasn't tied to my bench. For instance, I have a pharmacist now that is on maternity leave. And I've been on the bench since the beginning of October. And the techs probably hate me. I mean, I love them to death, but I'm the pharmacist that's got the stack of baskets that covers the entire counter, because I'll check a basket and then I'll go out there and glad hand and, kiss babies, hug ladies, and shake hands for as long as I can, trying to grow business and get people in the door. Or I'm walking around with my AirPods in, trying to put some new thing together for somewhere else, and that's just because that's what I'm best at. I think I'm a decent pharmacist, but I'm a better salesman. I'm a better, what's the word? I'm better at relationship building than I am at anything else. That's what's helped my stores when I'm in them, to grow, is just because of relationships, whether it was with a patient, a provider, some other secondary stakeholder, or another entity of some kind. It's those relationships that have kept adding to the growth. So, me getting off the bench, my staff is happier because the workflow is probably faster and more efficient, but two, my favorite thing about being off the bench is you. So how can I say this? It's like being here, looking at the world, and being here and looking at the world. I can suddenly see the big picture, and I can see all of the moving parts, whether it's our logistics and how we manage our delivery programs and understanding how the 3 stores should work in unison, or if it is the providers that would most benefit, their patient population most benefit from our programs, whether it's open enrollment or strategic partnership. I mean, just the list goes on and on and on and on. But if I'm checking, the hundreds of prescriptions a day that I have to check at my stores, I can't clear my mind long enough to do that. And I get up at 4:45 every day now. When I get home at 8 o'clock at night, I'm done. I'm ready to wind down and I'm ready to go to bed, and then I'll do it all again the next day. But by not having to concentrate so much on the bottles in my hand during the day, it allows me to have that time to develop these programs and do these things. And then the NDRX, I told you I'm long-winded. Then the NDRX, you get to help all these stores. And when I'm helping them, I'm also learning. There have been stores that they were the best in the country at this one thing inside their store. And so when I'm there to fix the things that they're not good at, I'm able to kind of see and understand and learn how they're doing those other things. This is what I was saying earlier about the peer thing, having a peer group of pharmacists that you talk with. I think this podcast is a great example. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to learn from one another, because the world's big enough. the world is absolutely big enough. There's plenty of prescriptions that, Walgreens, Walmart, CVS, they're low hanging fruit for you to go get business. You don't have to take it from that independent 2 counties away. So, I'm in these stores and I'm seeing this thing and I say, that won't work like it is as it is right there. But if I was to do this and carve this and change this and trim that, that could drop into my stores and work beautifully. And so, I think having the peer group and exposure to other stores and seeing how other people are doing things, that has probably been the secret to the success. And I couldn't have done those things if I was count, pouring, lick, and stick all day long and verifying,
I think so many pharmacies struggle with that because, if you have a pharmacy, if you have a business, obviously that's something you're passionate about. Those pharmacies that you've talked about that were rooted in that community for so long, if you're there and you're the owner, it's got to be hard to step back and delegate. And like they say at PDS, you can't work on your store if you're just working in your store, to have that bigger view. How do you talk yourself into letting go of the reins a little bit, and giving somebody else that autonomy to help your business succeed?
It was tough. And it still is tough. And now the mindset that I have now is that my stores are my clients. That has really helped me. So I take on the role of the consultant for each of my stores, and I'll go to that store and I will treat that pharmacist like they are the owner operator, and I'm consulting for them. Over the years I've developed an eye for issues and problems, and I can show them how to take corrective action. And then I told you, even in my own stores, I'll see something that they're doing that I really like, that it wasn't my idea and part of my design, but he or she has this way that they like doing it. And I'm like, we're going to do that at the other stores now. That's a great idea. I've even implemented that into some of my consulting things that I've learned from my staff pharmacist at some of my stores. So, but when I initially did it, I was hiring staff pharmacists, and they were basically doing a working interview that they didn't know about. I was trying to find the right type of individual to run my stores, people that I could give, the reins to. And financially, it really hurt, initially. Like that was a bad year for me because I absorbed all of this new payroll, and all the pharmacists out there know how this thing works. You grow, and things start getting good financially. Well, then you have to add staffing, and you have to add technology, and you have to expand into these things. So then it drops way back down. You just have to know that you have to continue to grow to get back up to where you were before. So, and I've gone through several of those where, it kind of the ebb and the flow, And so that was one of the larger ebb and flows when I first hired a pharmacy manager, and then I pulled myself off the bench or just worked as more or less relief. And I still work 6 days a week. I didn't take any days off for however long it's been now, and just to try to make sure that everything was going well. But the financial part was hard. But when I wasn't on the bench, I put a value on my time. The business background. So I put a number there, and I said, Joe, every hour that you're working, this is how much you're costing yourself to do it. So during that hour, I needed to be making, 5 times that in either lead generation or new patient acquisition, or developing a program that was going to have a stream behind it, or it was going to improve the quality of life of my patients or something. I had to put a number on it to make it make sense for me. And so that made me a lot more efficient when I wasn't doing it. And so I quickly realized that I could do more for my business out here, back here, or out there in the world than I could at that bench. And like I said before, they're probably better at that than I am, because they're not trying to be on the phone growing the program while they're checking the prescription. They're concentrating on what's in front of them, and that's what I want them to do. They all of them now treat the stores like they belong to them, which is great, and you need to empower them to do it. You can't you talk about handing the reins off, and I did this initially where I was working at this clinic. I was working there almost half the time. And so I was making someone else the manager, but I was still managing it. and it wasn't fair. And they weren't able to flourish and kind of let the store take on a piece of their personality. It was still, and she has a strong personality, so it was still like these two forces kind of, hitting each other. And finally, I said, all right, I'm taking a step back. I'm walking out. I'll be here when you're not, and I'll come back and basically treat you like a client and do this consulting. And then the store started climbing up. So, yeah.
So fast forward a little bit. That all sounds great before a COVID world. Surely nobody would open a pharmacy in 2020.
Well, I told you I like a lot. I like a lot going on. So here's what happened there. There was a large regional chain called Fred's. They were a discount store that had pharmacies, and they had been really, really aggressive in store acquisition in our area. And
really smaller areas all over the country.
Right. Yeah, they did. So did you have them out in Louisiana?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
Yeah, we had one here. I'm in a small town called Benton, and we actually had one here that just shut down, and a privately owned neighborhood market moved in, and so
there you go. So that's what I was doing. So there was an opportunity to backfill, and there was, at the time, there was only one. There was a Walgreens, and then there was a pharmacy inside of an FQHC in that community. And so I go down and I tried to buy the building that the Fred's had been in, and they couldn't sell because they still had a lease agreement. Walgreens was making Fred's maintain the lease agreement for however long, so it was like another year or more. And so I looked and for a building, and it was funny. The building that I called on, the guy's like, "Oh man, I will make you the sweetest deal." 3 months later, the entire building in the middle of the night collapses onto the street. I swear it completely fell off the block into the street. So glad I didn't really dig into that one. And I went to, I guess it had been a gas station at one time. There was a little laundromat on the corner in the same parking lot with the Walgreens. So I went over and I told the guy, I said, "Hey, I'd like to buy your laundromat." I'd worked for Walgreens. I told you before. When I stepped down, I became a market recruiter, and I traveled North Carolina, going to independent pharmacies, talking to their staff about coming to Walgreens and implementing buyouts and doing all this thing. So I knew how this whole thing worked because I'd done it for a year for Walgreens. I didn't have their pocketbook, but I was in a small rural community, and I was going to try to figure out a way to make this work. And the guy just laughed at me and told me, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, right across the street, there was a car wash and a laundromat and a little bootlegger house. And so I called, yeah.
Okay.
That's another story for another time. And so I called the guy that owned it, and I said, "Hey, would you be interested in selling?" And I didn't want all of that at the time. I just wanted to build a little community pharmacy right there in the Walgreens parking lot. And then I was going to put this big sign up. I had all these things in mind, really tacky stuff, real offensive, that was going to make them mad, but bring me patience. And he's like, "Well, yeah, we could talk about it." So we ended up working it out. So I bought a laundromat and a laundromat, a bootlegger, and a car wash. Within a week, I had torn down the laundromat and the bootlegger house and started construction. And it was slow. It was really, really slow. And because I'd torn down the laundromat and I started kind of exploring what else was out there, I decided that I would build a laundromat at the same time. So if you look at pictures on social media of Fairmont Drug Company, there's a Fairmont laundromat is right beside it, and that's ours too. And so that's actually worked out really well because it brings people to the store, and there's kind of a strategy there to incentivize patients, and it works out really well. But and so the funny thing is, the quick story here, the guy that I tried to buy the laundromat from to begin with, he's a very, very nice guy, and I like him a lot. The great family, everything. He came over and he wanted to buy the machines that we had taken out. And I said, "Sure, you can buy machines." He says, "Because I'm going to be the only laundromat in town now." And I was like, "Sure, you can sell them. I'll sell them to you." And I said, "But we are going to build another laundromat back." And he just rolls up the window and drives away. I was like, "God, he's a super great guy, though. He really is." They're a great family.
So it's interesting. I was looking, I was doing some research, and there's like franchising companies for laundromats, and when you're looking at that, you're looking at a lot of the same demographics and the same community tells as a pharmacy location. Anyways, you're counting rooftops, you're looking at street access, and then if you have something to do while people are doing their laundry, I mean it's a win-win. Not to mention you're backfilling that need within the community and providing an upgraded service. Most laundromats are a bit dated.
Right, for sure. Yeah, we're the only one within I don't know how many miles that has air conditioning. And during the summer, it was the biggest thing. They said we can't wait to get in there because you're gonna have air conditioning. We put the TVs up, we did all this stuff, and we do the wash dry fold service and delivery service. We do all these things that no one was doing in the area. So I mean, it's just like pharmacy. There's so many businesses out there right now that people have not updated. They have failed to move forward with where they need to go with their business. And it's just all of it spells opportunity, whether it's a car wash, a laundromat, a gas station, a grocery store. Just because the guy before you isn't where he needs to be doesn't mean that with the right amount of imagination, hard work, and effort, you can't make it whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, complacency is it's a heck of a hurdle for a lot of businesses. So you decided to build a new building in 2020 across the street from a big box store and add a laundromat. And so, I mean, if you really if you think about it from a business standpoint, there's a lot of things that say this is a good idea based on location. I mean, you're not going to lose. Are you going to lose patients or gain patients being right across the street from a big box store?
Oh God, man, they're the best thing in the world. I told you I wanted to be in the parking lot with them. No, it's gotten so bad at several times in my career that chain stores would not give us transfers without speaking to the patient first. When have chains ever done that? When I first got to Brisson, we would call, and then within 3 minutes we would get them, and then we kept getting them and kept getting them and kept getting them. Well, I knew some of the management at Walgreens because I had been a manager there. So I made a phone call or two. I'm like, what's going on? And it was like, oh, yeah, man, they got their eye on you. You'd call to get transfers, and it would be days before you would get them. So then they would have to speak to the patient. So what we ended up doing is, hey, I need to get some transfers. Well, we're going to have to speak to the patient. Yeah, I know. Here she is. And we just hand the patient the phone right there in front of us. And she'd say, yeah, I want my medicine down here. And they'd hand them back, and I'd go to talk to them again, and they'd already hung the phone up, So there.
So where are you spending the most time at now?
Well, I told you that I had one out of maternity. So I've been up at clinic, hired another pharmacist yesterday to help us out because we do have somebody that's going to be moving on to the next step of their career. And we are in the process of hiring yet another one. 2020 has been rough. 2021 is full of opportunity. So, and in so many ways that it's not even funny. I'm not going to talk politics, but we know with changes and transitions of the office at the top, there's going to be some changes in healthcare and how money is spent in certain programs, and that's going to lead to a lot of opportunity. We have COVID, so testing is still strong. The vaccine is going to be coming along. There's going to be ways there that we can, be a part of that. And clinical services are only going to grow. There's only going to be more and more of those. So what we're looking for now, the pharmacists that we're interviewing and talking with, are more clinically minded. And so through the relationships that we have with some of these external stakeholders, Troy Medicare, some of the local hospital systems, we know that there's going to be ways for us to continue to stretch and expand, and you need to be prepared for that. So this is another one of those places where it's going to rise and it's going to ebb and flow, and we're going to drop back just a little bit. But it's going to be short-lived. And I can't expect these people that I'm hiring to execute and achieve some of the goals that I set forth if they're so tied down at verifying prescriptions themselves. They're going to need time to set aside to focus on these things. Or they're going to need to go to classes and learn and spend time with some of the peers that I have to make sure that that we're ready and we can execute like we need to.
Yeah, 2020 was really a beat up on air conditioned laundromat of a year. So I think 2021 is going to be, that new building, hopefully. It's definitely an exciting time in pharmacy. Again, if you look back, immunizations didn't happen in 1994, right. And then now here we are where there's so much opportunity with Project Warp Speed, with healthcare looking for new ways to become efficient, for looking for new tools. There's so much opportunity out there for those who aren't complacent. So I'm going to toss it to you and let us close this out. Give us your closing thoughts. Give us some hope for 2021.
Well, I'll tell you right now, it's a buyer's market. It really is a buyer's market. If you're out there and you're aggressive and you're willing to keep an open mind, if you can move past the traditional model, use your imagination, go out, learn from others. Don't be afraid to call the guy. One of the ways I got started was I started calling stores in Oregon and Washington and Arizona because they wouldn't know who I was and they wouldn't care if I learned something from the conversation. I was afraid to call people close by because I thought they wouldn't share anything with me. Heck, I have people now in my same county that come into my pharmacy and I show them how I'm doing things, because the world is big enough for all of us. So go out, learn things, be aggressive. Find new ways of doing things. The bottom line is important. Don't ever forget about it. But when you put the patient first and you do right by them, it grows your bottom line faster than any other thing you can do. That's pretty much where I'm at, Will.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm going to go out today. The rest of my day, my batteries are going to be charged. So always a blast talking to you, Joe. Thanks so much for carving out some time for us between all of your other endeavors. And can't wait to catch up again soon, man.
Sure, brother. Looking forward to it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Scripts, presented by the Catalyst Pharmacy Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please support our channel by liking, subscribing, and clicking the notification bell so that you'll be notified anytime we post new content. To stay up to date with all of the latest independent pharmacy news and content, follow PioneerRx on your preferred social media platform.